Howdy, and welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome to White Hat Law. On the eve of the election today, we're going to have Dale Irwin to talk about real estate and all things real estate. Dale Irwin, I have here in my introductory thing that I got from somebody, is a real estate guru. Guru, it's a good title to have. I've been around for, looks like, close to 30 years. TCU area, Fort Worth, Air Force brat. What else do we need to know about Dale?
Oh, I've been in the Fort Worth area for 30 years. Like I said, actually longer than that. I moved back here when I was in 6th grade and got into real estate about 27 years ago, doing residential real estate primarily. Before that, I was a child abuse investigator. So it's like, related.
Child abusing investigator, what?
I was a child abusing investigator, that's right. Now I got to investigate child abuse for a few years and decided there was something better in life to do, and real estate's where I ended up.
Yeah, well, certainly less depressing. We're glad that you are joining us today. We're going to talk about real estate issues that people have, buying, selling, renting, that kind of thing. Tell me, of course, you've been a realtor now for how many years?
27.
27 years. So you may have picked something up along the way. If you're going to give advice to somebody who's about to buy a home or have an inspection, tell me where are the gotchas and from the legal aspect?
Well, the gotchas, I think from a legal aspect is, one, I am a realtor, so you should really be using a realtor and not be trying to do this on your own. There are all kinds of laws and rules that govern the real estate business, like disclosure. Sellers have to disclose known defects. And if they don't, there's penalties for that. We may talk about that a little bit in a minute. You have to put up, it's the most expensive investment most people make.
Right.
And there's some nerves around that. So it's always good to have good, competent, I'll use the word for lawyers, counsel, someone to help you through that process to keep you calm and to let you know the facts as they go. Probably the biggest disputes we have are over disclosure, over earnest money if something goes awry, where it goes, who it goes back to.
Well, there may be first time potential home buyers who don't know what earnest money is.
Okay, well, earnest money is what I call good faith money that a buyer puts up, typically deposited at a title company, not directly with the owner in the state of Texas, which we've had some problems with that out there these days, deposited with a title company, and then it gets credited back to them when they close, or after their due diligence period, it should be refunded if they choose to back out of their offer.
And if they, I guess in some situations, they'll back out because they couldn't get financing.
Correct.
And then
in our standard contracts that the state of Texas prepares through a broker lawyer committee that we as licensed practitioners have to use, there are several different dates and things that have to be kept up with. Financing is one of them, and a reason for a buyer to legitimately back out of the contract. Inspections are a reason to legitimately back out of a contract, especially if you're doing it during an option period. Sometimes the title can't be cleared up. Again, a legitimate reason to back out of a contract.
So why do we care about a title problem? What is it? What do these title companies really do anyway?
Okay, a title company, what they do is they take that contract and they search the title to make sure that you, the new buyer, own that property back to the sovereignty of the soil. I remembered that for real estate school. The sovereignty of the soil, to make sure that that title is clear. So 3 years from now, someone's 4 owners ago's dead granddaughter's cousin comes back and goes, well, wait a minute, I own that property. Well, a title company issues an insurance policy to protect that new buyer from that.
Right, and sometimes there's an easement that is on a document or is not on a document.
Absolutely. I've seen that mostly in rural properties, where like when you get the survey and there's not an easement on it, but there really was an easement on it, and then the title company steps in and makes that buyer whole, whatever that happens to be at that time.
Right, so the whole idea of the title company is to make sure that things are going to go, everybody's getting what they expected to get, or the buyer is. Well, like I said, we wanted to kind of introduce some of these ideas. We're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about contract disputes and when it's time to start actually litigating. So we'll hope you'll join us in just one moment.
Hang on, y'all. More with Warren when we get back. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Norrid. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome back. We're in the middle of episode 32, I'm told, so that's kind of fun. We're here with Dale Irwin, an experienced real estate practitioner.
Old dude, yeah.
Yes, let's not go the old word. Anyway, let's talk about litigation. And in your experience, at what point do you say, I've had enough of this, I'm going to get an attorney? When does it become worth it?
So part of the time, and my standard answer, when a client calls me and goes, okay, I'm going to go sue for whatever, my standard answer is no, not normally. Usually it's the lawyers that win and you are tied up forever, and sometimes your property's tied up and you can't sell it. But other times there is no option. So
Right.
The no option times are when blatant misrepresentation or something like that's really occurred that can be proven. I've seen that happen a lot of times. I've seen it where, deceptive trade practices. That's a big threat that we get pretty often. Realtors have certain exclusions from that in the law, but deceptive trade practices are big deals because you can be for triple damages. Yeah.
Triple damages. That's we love deceptive trade practices.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's when you can really prove some of that misrepresentation. Or the seller says, oh yeah, well, we did this $40,000 plumbing repair. Well, when they come to find out they hired their favorite handyman to do a plumbing repair and never had the plumbing fixed appropriately.
Right.
That's time for a lawsuit.
Maybe skip some of the niceties of inspections and such.
Yeah, and permits and things like that.
Permits are so slow. They slow it down. Why always with the permits?
We would have probably delayed the closing if they'd done it right. But yeah.
Right. We've had issues with people saying, let's talk about the difference between breach of contract versus fraud or deceptive trade practice, okay. Right? So if I say the fence will be repaired by next Saturday and it's not repaired until next Sunday, it's a breach of contract. It's not fraud or deceptive trade practice. If I say prepay me half the money and I take the money, I never do the fence work, and I never intended to do the fence work. I intended just to put the old slats back up and make it look like it's okay, and I'm just using all the money. But I always intended to rip you off. Okay, so I made a statement that was wrong, that I made for the purpose of misleading you. And I intended to damage you with that misrepresentative statement. I intended for you to rely on it, and then you were damaged. And then poof, we have a deceptive trade practice, or we just have fraud. And in Texas law, that ends up being a deceptive trade practice quite often. Usually people are not deliberately deceiving somebody. But it's often I intended to do the right thing and then it became inconvenient. And so I did the wrong thing hoping nobody would care. so there was black mold over here and I didn't get it mediated right. So I just kind of ripped it all out. Nobody really knew about it. So I put it all back. But somebody said, well, what did you do about that black mold? And then suddenly the buyer's, what? What's about that? I had a big lawsuit about that in Grayson County a couple of years ago.
And that's stuff that the seller should be disclosing to you. And I agree with you. The intent is a really big deal. I don't think 99.9% of people out there intend to defraud someone, but that 0.1% do. And the seller's disclosure laws with repairs and things, specifically since that's what you were talking about, are really, I don't know if they're really as much there is some intent from the legal side, but sometimes they're really small too. I mean, it's like the fence repair, $500, and I took $250, but I never got it fixed.
Right.
Okay. Was that really intended to defraud? Maybe. Maybe the guy had a death in his family. Maybe it took him a couple extra days.
He intended to do it. He just never got around to it.
Right.
Right.
So then,
still a breach.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I guess the fun thing that we do in the law is we actually assign blame and say this is evil, this is not evil, right? So if I say I'm going to mow your yard for $50 and I don't get around to it because my lawnmower breaks, there's not a moral failure there. It's not a moral failure. It's a breach, but there's no moral failing attached to a mere breach of contract. With the fraud or deceptive trade practice, there is a moral failing. We have said, you have done wrong. You've done evil. So I always enjoy talking about that. And,
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about evil enough and when it comes to law. What happens if you are buying a house from somebody that's a private individual? So two private people are working together. Are disclosures required?
Disclosures are required on every residential house deal in America, with a few exceptions. If it's an estate and you're like representing the estate, that doesn't count. You don't have to do a disclosure. If you are a foreclosure, whether that be bank owned or even a private note, if it's a foreclosure, that's a little questionable. But you're exempt from the disclosure law.
Well, I get that's often going to be going to an error or one more errors too. So that's
the heir never moves into it and all that. Now, if an heir moved into that house for a period of time, I think a disclosure would be appropriate. But if they're just selling it right from probate or whatever, they are technically exempt from having to do that. Now, probably one of the other big deals that come up with that, I'm an investor, I go buy a house and I redo that house and it started out as a foreclosure. That investor now is obligated to provide a seller's disclosure, though many of them don't want to.
I can imagine why. Because I really don't know enough about this house to really give you disclosure, and I don't really want to know. What if I've got a rent house and they're supposed to be paying me $2,000 a month and they aren't paying me or they're paying me slow? At what point do I go hire an attorney and go after them? Or do I have to hire an attorney for an eviction?
For an eviction, you don't really have to hire an attorney. You can certainly represent yourself. It is a small claims court or a justice court. Costs you about a couple $100 to file your stuff. But you have to make sure that you've given your notices to that tenant appropriately, because there's nothing quicker to get you thrown out of eviction court than to have given an improper notice.
And the people who scam landlords on this know what they're doing.
Oh, yes,
often
they do.
Better than the landlords.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yeah. So the people, gurus, they know how to. You've done your own evictions, right?
I have.
Yeah. So I've done a couple of evictions, but it's not what I do every day, right? And so it's a unique deal. But it is amazing how slithery some of the tenants are that know what they're doing. They kind of work you up, or they're going to be 3 or 4 days late the first month, and then they get you used to it. And then there's, I've got this excuse or that excuse, and pretty soon you're 6 months behind. They seem like nice people.
Yeah, I want to help them.
Right, and then don't fall for that. Do not fall for that. They're training you. You always have to figure out who's training who in this relationship.
And don't fall for that, because I speak from experience. So.
Every landlord can, all right? And so if they're late, you start the process. And then what inevitably happens is you get to bankruptcy. Do you hire an attorney then?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Hire an attorney for that. And talking of the eviction, so as a landlord, there's some pitfalls and weird things too that happen from the law side. So number one, even if I'm representing myself in my eviction, I go in, I get my judgment, and then if the tenant knows what they're talking about and doing, they'll file for an appeal. They file for a pauper's affidavit, so it costs them no more money.
But they don't often know that. If people knew about pauper's affidavits more, that would be more difficult.
And depending on who the justice of the peace is, some of them know about it more easily than others. But that delays you being able as a landlord to get them out of the house for 60, 90,
Oh, but come on, you're a rich
days.
dude. You don't care. It's not that big a deal,
That
right?
is exactly right. That's what they say.
It just drives me crazy. I tell people all the time, look, I had a rent house for a while. It was the old house that I used to live in, right? And so this is the normal way that middle-class people amass wealth, is they live in a house and they buy a new house and they keep and so they get 2 or 3, and if you have somebody in there that's not paying and you can't get them out, it is not trivial to your bank account.
No, not at all. I let someone kind of get behind multiple months, and instead of being able to do a 3-day notice and all this, the court ordered me, I had to give them a new 30-day notice, which actually bought them about 60 days extra in the house without rent. So,
and then the ones that are smooth will know how to file their own bankruptcy, and so now it's going to get dismissed in 3 or 4 weeks. But for 3 or 4 weeks, there's an automatic stay.
Yes.
So for all the landlords out there, if you have a bankrupt client or bankrupt tenant, you can't bother them once there's a stay. You have to go get an attorney.
Yes.
We do that pretty routinely.
Yeah.
It's about a third of our practice is bankruptcy, and so we help people who are both in the bankruptcy and then creditors or landlords. So, you got to do that right.
And never try to represent yourself when there's a bankruptcy involved.
Right. It's an arcane part of the law.
Yes.
You have to know what the secret words mean. So, well, that was fun. Okay, so when we get back, we're going to talk about the cost of litigation and real estate issues, and that'll be fun too. We'll be right back.
Hang on, y'all. More with Warren when we get back. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Norris. Take it away, Warren.
And welcome back to White Hat Law. We're talking to Dale Irwin about real estate litigation. And this last segment, we thought we'd talk about the cost. So what I'm going to expect to pay in real dollars whenever I start some of these processes. We talked a little bit about small claims. I've got a fence dispute with my neighbor. By the way, who's responsible whenever I've got a fence in disrepair between two houses?
Yeah, that's the question.
There's no good answer to that question.
There is not a good answer to that question.
There's never been. It is not. Let's clear up some. It is not the way the fence is pointing.
It's not.
It has nothing to do with that. It's hard.
It is. Fences are really tough. So are trees. If trees are on property lines.
Yeah, actually on the property
line. On the property line.
Yeah.
And like a branch falls off and hits the roof. This is also a personal experience. Who's responsible? Well, in my case, it was me that was responsible.
If it's on the border and it falls on your side, I think that the average judge would probably say if it's on each side's responsible for its side of the tree.
Well, yeah, mine fell on the house next door, though. But I was the landlord, not the actual tenant. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
It literally, the tree was. I mean, she sent the constable out to even look. The tree was like split right down the middle from a survey line.
Yeah, the trees. Yeah. So that's.
It was not bad. Trees and fences are really very hard.
Now you can get. In fact, in Arlington, I don't know about Fort Worth, but in Arlington, you can call the code enforcement if it's leaning over on one side, and you can sometimes get them to cite somebody. But if you can, good fences make good neighbors. Work with your neighbors on this, even if they're horses patoots about it.
Always.
It's just not worth it. It just isn't. But when it comes to things like this, how about letters from attorneys?
So real estate letters are what really kick us real estate brokers and agents into gear.
Yeah, there you go.
They really are when you get one of those, you start taking it seriously. Until then, phone call threats and all that doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
And depending on what the allegations are in that letter is how you handle it. Most of the time, it's a simple letter back from either the brokerage's attorney or a letter from our errors and omissions insurance company, and we get something worked out that's fair for everybody.
Yeah, I've seen demand letters from attorneys that, I think this is probably done by a third-year law student. It's about 2 paragraphs. I've seen demand letters that have the lawsuit attached. It says, I haven't filed this yet, and I don't really want to.
But in 10 days.
But we're going to have a talk about this real soon, or my client's going to say, file that bad boy, and it's going to suck. And so, and quite often you don't want to do that because there's just not, there's not enough money in this. It's not going to really help anybody. And at the end of the day, if you win a lawsuit, you don't get money. You get a piece of paper that says somebody owes you money. Now, sometimes in real estate, you get a restraining order or an injunction of some sort that says you'd stop doing that. You don't get to play your tuba in the backyard for all the neighborhood to hear all the time. But you have to look at that. And so from our office, a demand letter will usually range between $350 to $1,000. So if somebody's owing you $600 a month for rent, you have to really think about, is that worth it? And sometimes people will say, well, Warren, I want you to really demand lots of things. And I go, look, if you want me to do that, I can, but that means that you need to be ready to go to town on this, right? I'm not going to send out a demand letter and then if they don't comply, not file suit, because that's on me, right? We all have a reputation, right? So we don't. Now, if I send out a demand letter that's soft and says, I don't really want to file suit on this, and this actually happened in Dallas not too long ago. We sent out a demand letter, and it was about 2 pages, and it said, we need to talk about this. And then the recipients filed a lawsuit thinking that they were going to be up on us because they filed a lawsuit. Welcome to the party, pal. It's on. Okay, we'll do it that way, but not what you want. Not what you want. What have you paid, or what would you expect to pay to have somebody do an eviction for you?
Probably a couple $100, first level, 3-day notice. Show up in court if it goes that far. It's usually around $250 to $500 is what a normal eviction cost.
If you're doing it.
If I personally was doing it, I will do evictions for people sometimes for about $150. If the tenant knows how to do that appeal, I'm out. I can't do that anymore. I can only go as far as a justice court when it's not my own property,
right?
Kind of a thing. So,
right, because you have to have an attorney.
Correct.
Correct. Particularly if you're representing an LLC, you have to have an attorney.
Yeah.
It gets ugly, and
it does.
And of course, the JP court's wild, wild west, right? And so,
it depends on who your JP judge is as to how well you're received, and without an attorney, and it is the wild, wild west. That's a really good way to put it.
You see property tax issues very often.
I don't see the legal side of those very often. Now, every year when property bills come out, I have tons of clients call me and go, oh, they're saying my house is worth this and it's not, and all that. But most of mine's just provide some comps and they can go have a dispute. I certainly have helped people verbally. I don't like going down there, except on my own stuff, to go to the board, thank you, and do that. And right now our values have come so high, we're pretty fair because they are the taxing entities allowed to tax you at fair market value. Well,
they value at fair market value, but only can raise it at a certain rate.
Yeah, is it 10% per year, I think, is
something
what
like
the limit is? Yeah.
And then there's the issue of if it's your homestead, that's the fact.
Correct.
If it's not a homestead, and of course that's a major problem for people who have 2 or 3 grand homes. They bought this house, it's $100K, and now it's $160K, and they've got to raise the rent on whoever's living there.
Yeah, because you don't have homestead on rent houses.
Right.
That's not your homestead, so you don't get that little break.
Right. And you're not a major corporation, so you haven't bought off the local city council, so they're not giving you a break. But that's not fair either.
You think they do that?
Only every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the rest of us have to pay those. We've done some property tax mitigation work. Where you actually sue the taxing authorities and the appraisal district or whatever needs to be done. And that's non-trivial. But you have to have substantial property to make that worth it.
So I'll turn that around to you. I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
When you say that, is it a commercial property or something a little bit larger?
Yeah, almost.
Residential properties, not so much worth the lawsuit. I do recommend, though, nothing. It's not really a lawyer thing. There are people that do nothing but fight property taxes out there as a business. They're way better qualified to do that than you by yourself, or than me or anyone else.
We tend to have we use those guys as experts whenever we're doing a lawsuit. When we have a lawsuit, and so there's lots of guys that do a good job with that. So, Dale, you've been delightful, and we appreciate you coming on and chatting about this with us. We hope you enjoyed this and it's worth something to you. White Hat Law. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Nord. To find out more about Warren, check him out at nordlaw.com. See you next time.